Time had long since lost its meaning to Lyra. She had witnessed the birth and death of countless stars, watched galaxies collide and reform, and observed the slow dance of cosmic evolution with the detached curiosity of an eternal being. For millions of years, she had drifted through the vast expanse of space, cataloging the endless cycles of creation and destruction that defined the universe. Until today. The quantum research facility nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains should have been just another fleeting moment in her endless observations. Dr. Marcus Rivera's experiment was supposed to be a simple attempt to probe the nature of quantum entanglement. But as Lyra watched from her incorporeal state, something went wrong. The first sign was subtle, a shimmer in the fabric of reality that shouldn't have been possible. Marcus stood at his control panel, his dark eyes fixed on the readings that were rapidly becoming more and more unusual. His colleagues had already left for the day, leaving him alone with his work, as usual. "That's not possible," he muttered, running a hand through his prematurely graying hair. The quantum containment field was showing patterns that defied every known law of physics. And for the first time in eons, Lyra felt something she had almost forgotten: surprise. The experiment wasn't just measuring quantum entanglement, it was somehow reaching across the barriers between different states of existence. Including hers. Marcus's instruments began to whine, a high-pitched sound that set Lyra's ancient senses on edge. She could see the mathematical patterns forming in the air around him, equations and probabilities taking physical form in a way that no human technology should have been capable of achieving. She had to make a choice. For millions of years, she had been content to watch, to observe, to record. Never interfering, never participating. That was the way of her kind, the Watchers, as some younger civilizations had named them. But something about this moment, about this human's unwitting brush with forces beyond his comprehension, compelled her to act. Just as the quantum field began to collapse, Lyra took physical form for the first time in millennia. The sensation was shocking: the weight of matter, the pull of gravity, the limitation of existing in a single point in space and time. Her manifestation created a burst of light that temporarily blinded Marcus. "Step away from the controls," she said, her voice rough from disuse. Speaking with vocal cords instead of pure thought was strange and uncomfortable. Marcus spun around, his hand still on the emergency shutdown switch. His eyes widened as he took in her appearance, a tall, silvery figure with features that were almost but not quite human. What are you?" "Someone who has watched humanity since your species first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond," Lyra replied. She moved toward the quantum containment field, her newly physical form allowing her to interact with the technology. "Your experiment is creating ripples in reality itself. If it continues, you may tear a hole in the fabric of existence." Instead of running in terror, as she had expected, Marcus's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity. "You're saying my research actually worked?" "I was trying to prove that consciousness itself might be a quantum phenomenon, that observer effects could be manipulated to breach the barriers between different states of being," Lyra finished, allowing a note of impressed surprise to enter her voice. "You succeeded. Though not in the way you intended." The quantum field stabilized as she adjusted the controls, her millions of years of accumulated knowledge allowing her to understand and manipulate the technology with ease. But the damage was already done. She could feel it, a disturbance in the cosmic web that connected all things. Marcus watched her work, his initial shock giving way to intense fascination. "You're not human," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," Lyra agreed, finishing her adjustments. "I am something far older. A being who has watched the universe unfold since before your planet cooled from its molten state." "An eternal observer," Marcus breathed, his mind clearly racing with the implications. "That's perfect. My theory suggested that conscious observation could influence quantum states on a macro scale, but I never imagined A warning alarm cut him off. The stabilization wasn't holding. Lyra could feel reality trying to reassert itself, to heal the breach that Marcus's experiment had created. But something was wrong. The patterns were different than anything she had seen in her millions of years of watching. "This is unprecedented," she said, more to herself than to Marcus. "Your experiment didn't just breach the barrier between observer and observed. It created a cascade effect through time itself." Marcus moved to stand beside her, studying the readings. "Is that bad?" Lyra turned to look at him, really look at him, not just as another fleeting moment in the endless flow of time, but as an individual. In his eyes, she saw something she had almost forgotten, the burning desire to understand, to discover, to change. It was what had first drawn her to observe humanity all those eons ago. "It could be," she said finally. "Or it could be the most important moment I've witnessed in millions of years." The quantum field pulsed again, sending waves of probability cascading through the lab. As alarms began to blare and reality itself seemed to shiver around them, Lyra realized that for the first time in her eternal existence, she didn't know what would happen next. And strangest of all, she found herself excited by the uncertainty. The quantum physics lab had become a nexus of impossibility. Reality rippled around them like heat waves off hot asphalt, and Marcus watched in fascination as his equipment registered readings that should have been theoretical at best. Beside him, Lyra's silvery form seemed to flicker between solidity and something else entirely, as if she was struggling to maintain her physical presence in their dimension. "The cascade is spreading," she announced, her voice carrying undertones that made Marcus's teeth vibrate. "Your experiment didn't just create a local anomaly. It's generating quantum echoes through multiple layers of spacetime." Marcus moved to another monitor, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Like ripples in a pond?" he asked, trying to correlate the data with his existing theories. "More like fractures in a mirror," Lyra corrected. "Each break creates new breaks, spreading outward in patterns that—" She paused, and Marcus saw something he wouldn't have thought possible, an expression of genuine concern on her otherworldly features. "That what?" "That I've only seen once before, when the Eternal Ones reshaped an entire galaxy to prevent a breach in the fundamental laws of existence." The temperature in the lab seemed to drop several degrees. "The Eternal Ones?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to know the answer. Lyra's form solidified fully as she turned to face him. "There is a hierarchy to the universe, Dr. Rivera. I am ancient by your standards, yes, but I am young compared to them. They are the architects of reality itself, the beings who established the very laws of physics you study." A new alarm began to sound, its pitch almost beyond human hearing. On the main screen, fractal patterns were spreading outward from the point where Marcus's quantum containment field had failed. They looked almost like crystal growth, but in dimensions that shouldn't exist. "They're coming," Lyra said quietly. "They've felt the disturbance." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything that was happening. In the space of an hour, his research had gone from theoretical physics to summoning cosmic entities. "Can we stop it? Reverse whatever my experiment triggered?" "That would be unwise." The new voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It carried the weight of eons, making Lyra's ageless tones sound young by comparison. The air in the center of the lab began to fold in on itself, creating geometric patterns that hurt Marcus's eyes to look at directly. From this impossible space stepped three figures that seemed to be made of pure mathematics, living equations that had taken on forms that merely approximated humanoid shapes. "The breach cannot be sealed," said the first figure, its voice like the heat death of the universe-given sound. "The quantum entanglement has spread too far. The local galaxy must be unmade," added the second, whose form kept shifting between different geometric proofs. "It is the only way to contain the contamination." Marcus felt his heart stop for a moment. "Unmade? As in destroyed? You can't, there are billions of lives in this galaxy." The third figure turned toward him, its form a recursive pattern that seemed to contain infinite copies of itself. The preservation of fundamental cosmic law takes precedence over temporary arrangements of matter and energy. Temporary? Marcus sputtered, anger overriding his awe. Those temporary arrangements are living beings. They have hopes, dreams, families. Marcus, Lyra cut in, her voice carrying a warning. But he was too angry to stop. You can't just decide to erase an entire galaxy because one experiment went wrong. There has to be another way. The first Eternal One shifted its attention to Lyra. You have spent millennia observing these beings. You understand their temporary nature. Their insignificance in the grand scheme. I do, Lyra agreed, and Marcus felt his heart sink. But then she continued, I also understand that in all my millions of years of watching, I have never seen any species make the leap that humanity just did. They didn't just breach the barrier between observer and observed, they proved that consciousness itself is a fundamental force of reality. The geometric patterns making up the Eternal Ones became more complex, shifting in ways that suggested agitation. That is precisely the problem, said the second one. They have stumbled upon knowledge they are not ready to possess. Knowledge that could destabilize the very framework of existence, added the third. Marcus stepped forward, his scientific mind racing ahead of his common sense. But isn't that exactly why you should be interested in this? We've discovered something new about the fundamental nature of reality. Instead of destroying that discovery, shouldn't we be studying it? The Eternal Ones conferred among themselves in a language that sounded like pure mathematics. Lyra moved closer to Marcus, her silver form seeming to provide a buffer between him and the ancient beings. They're afraid, she whispered to him, her voice barely audible. In all their existence, they've never encountered anything like this. Your experiment didn't just breach the barriers between different states of reality, it proved that consciousness itself can alter those barriers. That's not supposed to be possible. Marcus watched the Eternal Ones, his mind working furiously. But you knew it was possible, didn't you? That's why you were watching Earth in the first place. Lyra's expression shifted slightly, the equivalent of a sad smile. I suspected. Humanity has always had a unique relationship with quantum mechanics. Your ability to affect reality through observation, to collapse wave functions through conscious intent, it's different from any other species I've encountered. The Eternal Ones finished their conference. The first one turned its attention back to them. We have reached a decision. The contamination must be contained. However, it paused, its geometric form shifting into new configurations. We will allow you an opportunity to propose an alternative solution. You have one rotation of this planet, said the second one. If you cannot find a way to prevent the quantum cascade from spreading, we will proceed with the unmaking. And if you attempt to interfere with our judgment, added the third, we will extend the unmaking to neighboring galaxies as well. The integrity of cosmic law must be preserved. With that, they folded back into their impossible geometry and vanished, leaving behind an air heavy with the weight of their ultimatum. Marcus immediately turned to the nearest computer, pulling up his experimental data. 24 hours, he muttered. We have 24 hours to solve a physics problem that the universe itself thinks is impossible. No, Lyra corrected, moving to join him at the console. We have 24 hours to prove that impossibility itself is merely a limitation of perspective. She paused, then added quietly, and to prove that some things are worth preserving, even at the cost of cosmic law. Marcus looked up at her, surprised by the emotion in her voice. You really believe that? After millions of years of just watching? Lyra's form shimmed slightly, and for a moment Marcus thought he could see all the ages she had witnessed reflected in her otherworldly eyes. Perhaps, she said, it took millions of years of observation to recognize when a moment truly matters. Together, they turned their attention to the screens full of impossible data, racing against time to save not just humanity, but an entire galaxy. The quantum cascade continued to spread through reality, its patterns growing more complex by the second. But now, looking at the data with fresh eyes, Marcus began to see something in the chaos, a pattern that suggested consciousness itself might be the key to understanding it all. They had 24 hours to rewrite the laws of physics. And somehow, despite the impossible odds, Marcus felt a surge of hope. After all, they had something the Eternal Ones didn't, the human capacity to imagine solutions that shouldn't exist, and the determination to make them real anyway. Time had always been a constant companion to Lyra, a steady stream of moments that she observed with detached interest. But now, watching the countdown on Marcus's lab computer, she felt its weight pressing down on her with an urgency she had never experienced before. They had already spent 8 hours attempting to understand the quantum cascade, and the solution seemed no closer than when they began. Marcus sat surrounded by holographic displays, his eyes red from staring at data streams. Empty coffee cups littered his workspace, testament to his very human need to stay alert. He hadn't slept since the Eternal Ones had delivered their ultimatum. "Look at this pattern," he said, gesturing to one of the displays. "The quantum entanglement isn't just spreading randomly. It's adapting somehow. Like it's learning." Lyra moved closer, her silvery form casting strange reflections on the screens. "That shouldn't be possible. Quantum effects don't exhibit learning behaviors." "Maybe they do now," Marcus replied, pulling up another dataset. "Or maybe they always did, and we just never had the right perspective to see it." He looked up at her, dark circles under his eyes but excitement burning in them nonetheless. What if consciousness isn't just collapsing wave functions? What if it's teaching reality new ways to behave? The idea sent ripples through Lyra's form. She had watched countless civilizations develop theories about the nature of reality, but this was different. This was dangerous. And fascinating. The Eternal Ones would consider that concept alone worthy of unmaking the galaxy, she said quietly. "Why?" Marcus demanded, standing up so suddenly his chair rolled away. "Because it suggests they might not understand everything about the universe they claim to maintain. Because it suggests that reality itself might be capable of evolution," Lyra replied. "And evolution implies change. The Eternal Ones exist to prevent change, to maintain the cosmic laws as they have always been." Marcus ran his hands through his disheveled hair, pacing the lab. "But that's exactly why this is so important. If reality can evolve, if consciousness can guide that evolution, then maybe the fundamental laws aren't as fundamental as we thought. Maybe they're more like guidelines that can adapt as the universe grows and learns." Lyra felt something stir within her, an emotion she hadn't experienced in eons, hope. But with it came fear. "Marcus," she said softly, "if you're right, it would mean everything I've watched for millions of years was leading to this moment. Every consciousness, every observation, every choice, all of it gradually teaching reality new ways to exist." "Exactly." Marcus turned to her, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "And your observations might be the key to understanding it all. You've watched the universe longer than any human could. You've seen patterns we couldn't possibly recognize." Before Lyra could respond, a new alarm sounded. On the main screen, the quantum cascade spread had accelerated, its patterns growing more complex by the second. "It's not just spreading anymore," Marcus muttered, studying the data. "It's, oh." His face went pale. "What is it?" "It's rewriting the quantum structure of everything it touches. Not destroying it, but changing it. Making it more like itself." He looked up at her, his expression a mix of awe and terror. "It's not a cascade at all. It's more like an awakening," Lyra finished. The word seemed to echo through the lab, carrying weight beyond its syllables. At that moment, the air began to fold again, and the Eternal Ones materialized. This time, their geometric forms seemed more rigid, more absolute in their angles and lines. "You have discovered the true nature of the contamination," the first one said, its voice colder than the space between galaxies. The universe itself is attempting to evolve, added the second. This cannot be permitted. The third turned its attention directly to Lyra. You must make your choice now, observer. Join us in maintaining the cosmic law, or be unmade with the rest of this galaxy. Lyra felt Marcus stiffen beside her. She could sense his fear, not for himself but for all of humanity, for every conscious being in the galaxy. In millions of years of watching, she had never intervened, never chosen a side. But now. Before I choose, she said, her voice carrying the weight of eons, answer me this: in all your existence, have you ever considered that your role might not be to prevent change, but to guide it? The geometric patterns making up the Eternal Ones became sharp, aggressive. Our purpose is absolute, the first one declared. Reality must be maintained. Even if that maintenance prevents reality from reaching its full potential. Marcus interjected. Even if you're stopping the universe itself from growing. Enough, the second Eternal One commanded. Choose, observer. Now. Lyra looked at Marcus, this brief, brilliant human who had dared to question the fundamental nature of existence. She thought of all the moments she had watched, all the lives and deaths and choices that had led to this point. And she realized that she had already made her choice, perhaps millions of years ago, when she first decided to watch humanity's story unfold. I choose consciousness, she said, her form blazing with sudden brightness. I choose evolution. I choose life. The Eternal One's forms became absolutely still. Then you choose extinction, they said in unison. But as they gathered their power to begin the unmaking, Lyra felt something else, a resonance in the quantum fabric of reality itself, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And in that moment, she understood what millions of years of observation had been preparing her for. She reached out, not with her physical form but with her consciousness, touching the quantum cascade that Marcus's experiment had triggered. And she felt it respond, not as a threat to reality, but as reality's own attempt to grow beyond its initial parameters. No, she said, her voice carrying new authority. I choose transformation. The lab erupted in light as Lyra made her choice, and reality itself seemed to pause, waiting to see what this ancient observer and her human ally would do next. The real question wasn't whether they could save the galaxy, it was whether they could convince the universe itself that it was time to wake up. The universe trembled. There was no other way to describe it. As Lyra's choice echoed through reality, the quantum cascade responded, its patterns shifting from chaotic spread to something more purposeful, more alive. The Eternal One's geometric forms became sharp enough to cut through dimensions, their anger manifesting as distortions in spacetime itself. You cannot stop what has already begun, the first Eternal One declared, its voice carrying the weight of universal constants. Marcus watched in awe as Lyra's silvery form began to change, becoming something more complex, more integrated with the quantum fabric of reality itself. She was no longer just observing the universe, she was becoming part of its evolution. I don't intend to stop it, Lyra replied, her voice resonating on multiple frequencies at once. I intend to guide it. As you should have been doing all along. The lab's instruments were going haywire, recording changes in fundamental forces that should have been impossible. Through the windows, Marcus could see the night sky changing, stars shifting color as the quantum cascade reached them, not destroying but transforming. You don't understand what you're doing, the second Eternal One warned. The cosmic law must be maintained. Reality cannot be allowed to. To what? Marcus interrupted, stepping forward despite the overwhelming pressure of their presence. To grow. To learn. To become something more than what it was. The third Eternal One turned its attention to him, its geometric form twisting in ways that hurt to look at. Your species cannot comprehend the consequences of this change. The universe operates on precise laws for a reason. Maybe those laws were just the beginning, Marcus argued, moving to his main console. Look at this data. The quantum cascade isn't destroying anything, it's creating new possibilities, new ways for reality to express itself. He pulled up a holographic display showing the spread of the transformation. The patterns were beautiful, fractals within fractals, each layer more complex than the last. But there was order in the complexity, purpose in the chaos. The universe is conscious, Lyra stated, her form now pulsing in sync with the cascade's patterns. It always has been. We just couldn't see it before because we were looking for the wrong signs. The fundamental forces aren't just laws, they're thoughts. Ideas. The universe's first attempts to understand itself. The eternal ones began to move, their forms spreading out to surround the lab. This heresy cannot be allowed to continue. We will begin the unmaking now. Reality buckled as they gathered their power, the very fabric of space beginning to unravel around them. But Lyra stood firm, and Marcus felt something he hadn't expected, a connection, not just to her, but to the quantum cascade itself. To the universe's awakening consciousness. Every observation changes the thing being observed, he said, understanding flooding through him. That's not just quantum mechanics, it's the universe trying to communicate with itself through us. Through every conscious being that's ever looked up and wondered. Lyra's form expanded, interweaving with the quantum patterns that now filled the lab. For millions of years, I watched. I saw civilizations rise and fall. I saw consciousness emerge again and again, each time adding something new to the universal pattern. But I never understood why until now. The Eternal Ones began their unmaking, their power reaching out to erase the local galaxy from existence. But where their influence touched, it met something new, the combined consciousness of every being in the galaxy, channeled through the quantum cascade, guided by Lyra's ancient awareness and humanity's endless capacity for innovation. Reality isn't a set of unchanging laws, Marcus realized, his hands flying over the controls as he worked to stabilize the cascade. It's a conversation. A dialogue between consciousness and possibility. And we've all been participating in it since the first atom looked at another atom and decided to form a molecule. The lab became a battlefield between two fundamentally different versions of reality, the rigid, unchanging cosmos of the Eternal Ones, and the living, evolving universe that Lyra and Marcus were helping to awaken. Equipment sparked and failed as fundamental forces fluctuated wildly. You cannot win this conflict, the Eternal Ones proclaimed in unison. We are the maintainers of cosmic law. We are eternal. Nothing is eternal, Lyra countered, her consciousness now spread through the cascade, touching every transformed particle. Everything changes. Everything grows. Even you. Marcus watched in amazement as the quantum patterns began to respond to their combined will, his understanding of the mechanics, Lyra's ancient perspective, and the awakening awareness of reality itself. The cascade was no longer just spreading, it was creating something entirely new. Look, he said softly, pointing to his displays. The transformation, it's not random. It's creating new connections, new possibilities, but it's preserving the essential patterns that make existence stable. It's not destroying the cosmic law, it's helping it evolve. The Eternal Ones hesitated, their geometric forms showing the first signs of uncertainty. In that moment of hesitation, Lyra made her move. She reached out, not to fight them, but to show them what she and Marcus had discovered. See what we see, she urged, her consciousness brushing against their ancient awareness. Feel what we feel. The universe isn't ending, it's finally, truly beginning to live. Reality held its breath as the Eternal Ones experienced something they had never allowed themselves to consider, the possibility that their role as maintainers of cosmic law might itself be part of the universe's evolution, not its end point. But before they could respond, a new change began, one that would force everyone, from the most ancient cosmic beings to the youngest conscious particles, to make a final choice about what kind of universe they wanted to exist in. The transformation was accelerating, and with it came a decision point that would reshape existence itself. As alarms blared and reality trembled on the edge of unprecedented change, Marcus and Lyra prepared to face the consequences of their defiance, and the possibility that awakening the universe's consciousness might have costs they hadn't imagined. The universe held infinite possibilities in every moment, but this moment, this single point in time and space, would determine which of those possibilities would become reality. In Marcus's lab, where an experiment in quantum physics had evolved into a battle for the very nature of existence, everything hung in perfect balance. Lyra's consciousness, spread through the quantum cascade, touched every transformed particle in the galaxy. She could feel them all, every star, every planet, every living being, all of them now part of something larger, something that was just beginning to understand itself. And at the center of it all, Marcus Rivera, the human whose curiosity had catalyzed this cosmic awakening. "The transformation can't be contained anymore," Marcus announced, his voice steady despite the enormity of what they faced. "It's reaching critical mass." The Eternal One's geometric forms shifted in patterns that suggested growing alarm. "If this continues, the fundamental structure of reality will be irreversibly altered," the First One declared. "It already has been," Lyra responded, her voice carrying echoes of every observation she had made across millions of years. "The question is whether you will help guide this evolution or try to prevent the inevitable." Through the lab's windows, the night sky had become a canvas of impossible colors as the quantum cascade transformed the very way light moved through space. Stars weren't just points of fusion anymore, they were nodes of consciousness in an awakening cosmic mind. "We begin the unmaking now," the Eternal Ones announced in unison, their forms expanding to encompass the lab. "The cosmic law must be preserved." But as they gathered their power, something unexpected happened. The quantum cascade, now spread throughout the galaxy, began to respond not just to Lyra's guidance or Marcus's understanding, but to every conscious being it touched. Billions of minds, from the simplest forms of awareness to the most complex intelligences, all became part of the pattern. "Look!" Marcus called out, pointing to his displays. "The cascade, it's not just transforming reality. It's creating a network, connecting everything it touches." Lyra felt it too, a vast web of consciousness forming, each mind adding its own unique perspective to the whole. "This is what I've been watching for all these years," she realized. Not just the development of individual consciousness, but the emergence of something greater. The Eternal Ones paused in their unmaking, their geometric forms showing signs of what might have been confusion. "This pattern, it is not chaos," the Second One observed. "It's harmony," Lyra explained, her form pulsing with the combined awareness of billions. "The universe isn't just a set of laws to be maintained. It's a mind trying to understand itself, and every conscious being is part of that understanding." Marcus stepped forward, his own consciousness now somehow both individual and part of the greater whole. "You don't have to unmake anything," he told the Eternal Ones. "You can be part of this instead. Your perspective, your understanding of cosmic law, it's valuable. It's part of the pattern too." The lab filled with impossible geometries as the Eternal Ones considered this. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for their decision. But Lyra suddenly realized something that millions of years of observation had prepared her to understand. "It's not their decision to make," she said softly. "Not anymore." The quantum cascade had reached a critical point, not of destruction but of transformation. The universe itself was choosing to evolve, to become something more than the sum of its laws and constants. The Eternal Ones could guide this evolution or resist it, but they could no longer prevent it. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, watching as new patterns formed in the cascade, more complex and beautiful than anything he had imagined possible. "The moment that matters," Lyra replied. "The point where observation becomes participation, where consciousness recognizes itself in everything it perceives." The Eternal One's forms began to change, their rigid geometries becoming more fluid, more alive. "We have maintained the cosmic law since the beginning," the First One said, its voice carrying new undertones of wonder. "Perhaps," the Second added, "that was only the first stage of our purpose. The law evolves," the Third concluded, "as all things must." Reality shimmered as the Eternal Ones made their choice, not to unmake but to participate in the universe's awakening. The quantum cascade, guided by the combined consciousness of countless beings, began to stabilize into something new, a reality that was both ordered and alive, both constant and evolving. Marcus looked at his displays in amazement. The patterns, they're self-sustaining now. The transformation isn't going to collapse or run out of control. It's reaching equilibrium. A new kind of equilibrium, Lyra agreed, her form beginning to condense back into something more singular, though she remained connected to the vast web of consciousness that now spanned the galaxy. One that allows for both stability and growth. The Eternal Ones moved through the lab, their forms now harmonizing with the new patterns of reality. We will help guide this evolution, they announced. The cosmic law will grow as consciousness grows. Lyra turned to Marcus, seeing him truly not just as another moment in time but as the catalyst who had made all of this possible. In millions of years of watching, she said, I never imagined I would be part of such a change. Marcus smiled, exhausted but exhilarated. Maybe that's why this moment mattered so much. Not because it was predetermined, but because you chose to do more than observe. Outside the lab, the galaxy continued its transformation, not into chaos but into a new kind of order, one that recognized consciousness as a fundamental force, as essential as gravity or electromagnetism. The universe had taken its first steps toward true self-awareness, and every conscious being was part of that journey. Lyra, who had watched for so long, now understood that some moments were worth more than eternal observation. Some moments called for participation, for choice, for change. And in choosing to be part of this moment, she had helped the universe choose its own path forward. The stars shone with new awareness, the quantum web hummed with countless consciousnesses, and reality itself had evolved. Not ended, not unmade, but transformed into something that could grow and learn and become more than the sum of its parts. In the end, it wasn't about maintaining unchanging laws or preventing chaos. It was about recognizing that the greatest constant in the universe was change itself, and choosing to be part of that change, to guide it, to help it flourish into something beautiful and new. Millions of years had passed, but only this moment had truly mattered. Because in this moment, the universe had finally, truly begun to live.